The Hong Kong government is expected to introduce laws next week to ban the trade in human organs from China. Taiwan is expected to do the same following protests by human rights organisations. They say the organs are taken from executed prisoners. Around 2,000 kidney transplants are performed in China every year, many on foreigners who pay up to £20,000 for operations. China says organs from executed prisoners are used only very rarely and only with the prisoner's prior permission. This special report from Sue Lloyd-Roberts.
Every week throughout China, groups of prisoners are sentenced to death in public. On special days like National Day and the New Year, which are televised, the numbers can swell up to 100. The crimes of these young people, some only teenagers, range from murder to car theft or mere political dissent. Under this scar left by a kidney transplant operation in China, there is almost certainly the kidney of an executed prisoner. It's claimed that 90% of the organs used come from this source, and a lucrative trade is developing from patients who come to China for transplants from America, Europe and nearby Hong Kong. It's believed hundreds of foreigners are coming to China every year for their kidney transplants to hospitals like this in Canton that services the Hong Kong market, and that the number is increasing all the time. What worries human rights organisations is the possible connection between this growing business and the increase in the number of death sentences being handed out in China today. While the prisoners are taken out to be executed, an unmarked ambulance containing doctors and the equipment necessary to extract the organ leaves the hospital for the execution site. Here in a hospital in central China, a patient is prepared to receive the executed prisoner's organ. In the complex transplant process, every minute counts.
My kidney was very fresh. The doctor said the prisoners were young, all under 25 and healthy. They took the kidneys out at the execution site, less than an hour's drive from here.
Although the patients were keen enough to talk, the use of executed prisoners as organ donors is not normally talked about in public in China, and certainly not to foreigners. I and my Chinese colleague were asked to leave. Most of the information about the execution and transplant program in China comes from outside, from expatriate Chinese like Gao Peikui, former deputy police commander in Shenzhen City, who's currently seeking political asylum in Britain. He claims there are at least 10,000 executions in China a year, describing them in horrific detail.
The procedures differ according to different areas in China, but for the most part, they tie the prisoner's hands behind his back. They also put a rope around his neck to stop him shouting out anti-government slogans before he dies. Just before they shoot, they make him get down on his knees, and then, to ensure that the marksman can get a good shot, they may bayonet him in the back to make the torso go rigid. In the 10 years that I worked for the Public Security Bureau, I never saw or heard anything to suggest that death row prisoners were asked for their consent before donating organs, nor was the family asked. In fact, the prisoner's family would be held under house arrest while the execution were taking place. Only after agreeing to pay for the urn would they be allowed to come and collect the ashes.
And even more grotesque, this evidence from a doctor who, as a medical student, was ordered to remove kidneys from prisoners while they were still alive.
I was ordered to take both kidneys from an anesthetized prisoner. Without both kidneys, a person dies within 24 hours. After I had sewn him up, the organs were taken away by helicopter. Of course, kidneys are better fresh, and I can only assume they were for a high-ranking party member.
Beyond the demands of the party, organ transplants have become big business in China. They've modernized Hospital No. 1 in Chengdu to accommodate patients from abroad who pay the hospital £20,000 for a kidney transplant. It was regarded as a routine matter when we inquired at the hospital about arranging an operation for a fictitious sick relation. We were told there'd be no problem, and they were accustomed to patients from overseas. Most from America?
America, maybe the majority America, and somebody from Macau or Hong Kong or something.
All over the world. We were referred to Comrade Wu, the hospital's liaison officer with foreigners, to discuss money, a meeting that I filmed secretly. No, we don't take credit cards, she said. We prefer cash, preferably dollars. Things are done differently here, she explained. We can do what is impossible from the legal point of view in your country. But she became quite agitated when I asked whether this meant the organs come from prisoners.
I'm not saying whether it's prisoners or not. The state policy is that you are not allowed to meet the donors. I suggest you stay out of this and don't get involved.
The temptation to keep China's death rows filled is huge. There's a shortage of donors throughout the world. In Hong Kong, only a few dozen transplant operations are performed every year, while the waiting list runs into hundreds. No wonder those who travel to China to have their operations bury their doubts.
I felt so happy when I got my kidney in China, but confused as well. Maybe he was a big criminal, but maybe the donor was innocent.
Although the Hong Kong government is introducing laws to ban the trade in organs here, it argues that in a territory that rejoices in the free market, it's powerless.
There's no way that Hong Kong can, through laws or otherwise, stop people from going to China for treatment one way or the other. And of course, transplantation is a form of treatment.
It's the involvement of doctors in this kind of treatment that has outraged the Western medical community and encouraged Ronald Gutman, spokesman on ethics for the International Transplant Committee, to call for a boycott on all Chinese doctors and hospitals involved.
I don't think that doctors should be associated with death chambers. I have a hard time believing that you can dissociate a post-execution process from the execution process itself. And I think that executions are issues that should be left to the state and the judiciary to decide whether they do them or not, and that the medical profession should stay away.
In most villages and towns in China today, you find execution notices. Human rights organizations claim that the number of death sentences being carried out is higher than at any time since the 1950s. They fear that with the financial advantages involved, there's little incentive to reverse this trend. Sue Lloyd-Roberts, BBC News, China.